Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Kostelnik with Rooted Behavioral Education. I'm a clinical health psychologist and fellow vestibular warrior committed to bringing you educational content to further your vestibular recovery. I'm so excited today. We're going to kick off my expert interview series talking about environmental toxin exposure. So, what is environmental toxin exposure? It's really all the toxins we're exposed to, which includes the food we eat, the products we use, the buildings we live in and work in, and even the air that we breathe. The environmental toxic exposure has really become catastrophic, and it's thought to contribute to people getting sick and staying sick. In fact, the CDC estimates that 6 in 10 adults in the US live with chronic illness, with 4 in 10 living with multiple chronic illnesses. Today, we're going to be focusing specifically on toxin exposure in personal care products with our expert, Lauren. And this is important to the vestibular community because common product ingredients can be toxic to our brains, our hormones, and even cause cancer, which we know is detrimental to vestibular health. So, I'd like to introduce everyone to Lauren Evashenk. She is the founder and owner of Naked Truth Beauty. She has a master's in communication management from the University of Southern California and a certificate in green chemistry and sustainability from the University of Washington. So let's welcome Lauren. Thanks for being here today.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure.
Be here.
So, to get the conversation started, I think we'll talk about kind of there's a movement towards clean products. And I'm wondering if you can explain to everyone what this means and why it's important.
It's definitely a layered conversation, but the long and short of it is that in the United States, the personal care industry or cosmetics industry, whatever you want to call it, is essentially unregulated. No product or ingredient is tested for consumer safety before it hits the shelves. This obviously excludes things that are considered to be a drug by the FDA. So, sunscreen is something that is regulated by the FDA and is its own conversation. Um, but you go to the drugstore and none of those products are mandated to have been tested for consumer safety. And it's on the manufacturer to do no harm. But even if a product is found to or suspected of being unhealthy for the user, it's on the FDA to prove the legal case, to prove that that is dangerous. And as you can imagine, that's really costly. So, long story long, I suppose. There are chemicals of concern in personal care products, and there are differing opinions on how concerned we should be about those things.
Mm,
But in the past, I would say 10 years or so, and especially in the past 5 years, consumer awareness for these chemicals that maybe we don't want to be putting on our bodies has really grown. The awareness for that has grown. And so there's been a push for personal care products that don't have these things. And
okay.
you may have heard that originally, like as organic or natural, and this new buzzword, clean, reflects more of the concept of just because it's natural doesn't mean it's good for you, and just because it's synthetic doesn't mean it's bad for you. So clean is
Okay.
more of the idea of um, a product that may have botanical ingredients, may have synthetic ingredients, but all of those ingredients should be better for our bodies and better for the environment.
Okay. So it sounds like with the way that you said the FDA kind of it's costly to prove that something is bad for you. It sounds like it works similarly to our legal system, like innocent until proven guilty kind of
Well,
situation.
it's very much an ask forgiveness, not permission system, and
Okay.
really hope you don't get caught.
Right. And that's kind of scary when it comes to our bodies and the toxins that we're, you know, ingesting or through our skin and the toxic buildup. So when you think you mentioned clean and natural, and I know those can be marketing terms, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So
Mhm.
when we're talking about clean products or trying to minimize our toxin exposure, what types of products are we talking about? Like what should we be looking at closer?
Well, first, I'd like to sort of back up a little bit, and I want to make
Sure.
clear that I don't think that brands are out here trying to poison the public. Like I don't mean to make them sound malicious. Um, and there's a big debate across the cosmetics industry about what safe or unsafe really is. And it all comes down to this concept of what's called a safe dose. So you can have something that if you were to eat it all day, every day, only that all day, every day, of course it's going to give you cancer. But if it's included in a cosmetics formulation at less than 2% and you're putting it on topically and not ingesting it, how much of an exposure risk really is that?
Mhm.
So there are different levels of concern and comfort. So some people say this isn't a big deal, it's not a meaningful exposure, and other people say yeah, but I don't want that at all. So a really excellent example is lead. So all the FD&C colors, that's food, drug, and cosmetics colors. So like red 7, that those kinds of colors that you see,
Mhm.
um, those are legally allowed to have. Those are never mind. Those are legally allowed to have. I was going to go down a different rabbit hole and decided it's against it. There's too many. Um, those are legally allowed to have low levels of lead, and the FDA, which actually does regulate color additives, side note, they've determined that that's a safe dose. That low levels of lead in a set amount is an acceptable exposure for the public. Meanwhile, the Mayo Clinic says that lead poisoning occurs when you add up lead exposure over periods of time. Um,
Sorry for the dog.
so all of
He's
them.
very angry about the lead exposure.
He should be. He should be, man.
Yeah.
So if the Mayo Clinic says it's lead poisoning is exposure over a period of time, and our bodies don't get rid of heavy metals very easily.
Mhm.
So what is a safe dose if you're putting the lipstick on your lips and
Right.
ingesting it all day, every day for decades?
Mhm. And
Nobody.
the trouble, I think, kind of from my perspective, from a research perspective, is how do you test for that? Who are you going to expose to lead and then who's going to get the placebo? Like that's
Right.
an ethical conundrum that, no IRB or institutional review board is going to say, yes, you can expose people to lead.
Absolutely.
So that's a big problem in terms of research and actually
Mhm.
learning what does lead exposure do? How much does your body really accumulate over time?
Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting, interesting is an interesting word to use, but with the safe dose conversation is, you know, these products don't exist in a vacuum. We wash our hands with soap, we put lotion on our skin, it puts the lotion on the skin. Um, we brush our teeth, we wash our face, we wash our hair, if you wear makeup, you wear makeup. There are all these different types of personal care product, deodorant, personal care product exposures that really add up. And when they're saying, well, this is a safe dose for, excuse me, a safe dose for this one thing, we're not also looking at it in terms of if you're maybe being exposed in other places,
Mm,
or if that ingredient is necessarily bioaccumulative, meaning that it builds up in the body.
mhm,
So we've had environmental issues, to your point, of um, toxins, not necessarily personal care product related, but toxins in other industries, bio bioaccumulating in wildlife and biomagnifying through the food chain and
mm,
causing harm because it amplifies.
right.
So I guess that is like pretty far down the rabbit hole, but that's just something that those are things that I think about, where it's not just about what am I putting on my body that is potentially impacting me today, but how is what I'm using also impacting our world and coming back into the soil and into the waterways and into the seafood we eat, etc.
Mhm, mm.
So I think it's a bigger picture, but just since this sounds kind of bleak, I do want to say that they've done some studies about looking at the buildup of these chemicals in people's systems, And if you stop using the products, like, heavy metals, different story. But like for the most part, these kinds of chemicals of concern do flush out of the body. So
Okay.
if you're listening to this and you're going, ah, you stop using those things, your body will get rid of them.
Yeah.
And so like, it's not, I don't want to cause panic. It's just that it's important that we're all our own regulators and that we're not trusting these companies to make health decisions for us and that we're taking those decisions into our own hands.
Just like I've talked a little bit about on social media or on my website about us kind of being our biggest advocates, even with
Absolutely.
medical, with our doctors, because we know our body's best, and we really have to be the ones to look out for ourselves.
Yeah, and there's definitely a push in the cosmetics industry, I would say, to be aware of this. And I think that has a lot to do with consumer awareness and consumer pressure, voting with our dollars and this and that. So I'm sure that if you pay attention in the shampoo aisle, you'll see sulfate free. Um,
Hmm.
and sulfate's a surfactant. It's what like makes it lather nice and whatever. But it's pretty harsh on like so if you've got fine hair like I do, it's a little bit tough on the system. Or paraben free. Parabens have really um, gotten a bad rap over time, or over the past few years. So you'll see a lot of things that say paraben free to reflect they're not using parabens as a preservative. So just so everybody knows, you asked about chemicals or like things we should be looking for.
Hmm.
Um, the paraben is, I guess, a suffix. So you have like methyl paraben, butyl paraben, propylparaben. So there are different types of parabens.
Hmm.
And if you want to go into detail, they're not all created equally in terms of ones that you should or that I would personally avoid. Um, but if you want to just go easy, just scroll down to the bottom of the ingredients list. And if there's a word that says paraben in it, you can be like, hey, no thanks. That's easy. Um,
So let's talk a little bit about the marketing. So I know you mentioned some specific ingredients like sulfates and parabens. I feel like when I go to the grocery store, I notice things say natural. Or
oh,
can you talk a little bit about some of the marketing tactics and like are those things we really need to take a closer look at? Can we trust what it says on the surface when it says natural?
oh boy. Um, so buzzwords are important because how else do you narrow the field? We're humans. There's just information pelted at us all the time. And so seeing a word natural helps maybe distinguish from something else on the shelf. And you can say, okay, this is the one I'm going to take a closer look at.
Hmm.
With that said, words like natural or organic, even, unless you're seeing the USDA certified organic seal on it, not regulated. There's no legal definition for that. And so what that means is that, there's no industry standard for what natural means. So it contributes to what we call greenwashing. And greenwashing is making claims of um, health, good for your body, natural, good for the environment, sustainable, whatever these kind of buzzwords are, without really backing it up with what they're doing. So, yeah, if you see natural on something, it that doesn't unfortunately mean anything. There's no legal obligation for that company to follow it up with anything. So, these buzzwords can be good terms to use to filter through the massive number of products that we have to choose from, but they're I definitely wouldn't take them at face value.
Okay. And it sounds, or I guess my assumption would be that these products toxic exposure or toxic ingredients exist on a continuum. So maybe it's more natural than the next one, but you still might want to take a closer look at what the ingredients actually are.
Yeah, and I refer to that as the spectrum of green. That there are, and I actually expand what earns a spot on that spectrum to be more than just the ingredients. And that's something that we can talk about later. But they're different. They're different levels of concern or natural or this and that. So, for example, if you want an oil-based product, which people watching this, like maybe the thought of an oil-based product like gives you the heebie-jeebies. Um, but I love oil-based products.
Hi,
They're
me too. It's like all I used.
yeah, they're great. If you've been told your whole life that oil is bad, just give it a shot. It's nice. Um, and the right oil shouldn't break you out. But if you use an oil-based product, meaning a waterless, juiceless, like aloe-free product, oil is in a natural breeding ground for bacteria, the way water is. So it doesn't need a heavy-duty preservative the way that a water-based product does. Like if you see a product that has water in it and you're looking at the ingredients list and you don't see a preservative, that is a problem, my friend. And those products exist. There was a product that was in Sephora by a brand that I won't name. And my friend who runs a skincare company and I were just like kept looking at the ingredients going, there has to be a preservative here. There has to be one. And there's not. And lo and behold, you look at the reviews. We looked at the reviews and I was like, this product molded. Yes, it did. Yes, so, preservatives aren't bad. Like you're putting something in your like next to your eyes. You don't want there to be weird bacteria in there.
Right.
So it's not this black and white thing, but like if you want to use a lipstick that doesn't have a heavy duty preservative in it, it doesn't need to be a water-based product.
Hmm.
So like that can be darker green because it could just be olive oil, beeswax. It could literally actually just be like olive oil and beeswax. And it's like lip balm, great.
Hmm.
Or it can be one of these complicated lip balms that you can pick off the aisle at the supermarket that's water and PGs and this and that, and all huge list, so you can choose where to do things. And then
Hmm.
maybe with your mascara or even your foundation, things that really you're looking for a certain feel or effect with, you have something that has more ingredients or has more ingredients that are maybe um, less purely unthreatening, you know?
So let me touch on a few things there that you were mentioning. So first you said darker green. So on your continuum, is
Well,
darker green
yeah.
more clean or less clean?
Sorry, you can't read my mind. Yeah, no, I think of it as like light green being less aggressively healthy for humans, planet, wildlife communities, and dark green being doing everything you possibly can to be as close to nature as possible.
Gotcha.
Um,
So along that conversation, so you said you might choose some dark green things, some light green things. So it sounds like it's really about harm reduction and choosing, what's most important. Like, for example, if you're going to a wedding and you're going to be crying, maybe you're going to choose the waterproof mascara, and that might
yeah,
be light green or yellow.
yeah, and that's the thing is, you know, I've been researching this field for about a decade now, and there was a period of time where I was pretty militant about all of the things in my life, and I've come back to a little bit more of a moderate stance because there's only so much we can do, but let's make the best choices that we can when we can do it, and make the healthier choices when we can do that. And I worry that it's easy to get into these kind of all or nothing thinking patterns with all sorts of things,
Hmm.
like even something like zero waste. It's like zero waste would be great, but what about just less waste?
Right.
Like if you can choose not to take a straw that one time, that's still cool. Even if you're not carrying around your like bamboo straw with you. You
Right.
know what I mean? So I don't want, I worry about the fear mongering in the clean beauty field. And
Hmm.
I want people to feel empowered with knowledge and to know that when they purchase a product, they're making a choice, because I know that before I realized that the cosmetics industry wasn't regulated, I didn't realize that I was making a health choice. I
Mhm.
just didn't know. Why would I think that this wasn't regulated? Why would I think that anyone could consider these things as unhealthy? It just
Mhm.
didn't occur to me. So I just want people to know that they're making choices and to make it easier to make better choices where it makes sense for them to do so.
Mhm.
So like if you have, like as I said, if you have a foundation that you love, I'm not I'm not throwing stones about you using that foundation that you love that has whatever in it that's considered to be not good. Again, people ask me if things are good or bad all the time, and I'm like, according to what? um, but but it's like, but you can choose to, like, for example, an easy way to reduce your exposure is just to say no to fragrance. Um, Fragrance
So yeah,
is,
let's use that as kind of a segue to
yeah,
talk about what types of products, what types of ingredients are the worst offenders. So what should we be looking out for?
honestly, fragrance is like my number one thing that if I see on a label that it just says fragrance or parfum, I'm just kind of like, oh, no, thanks. And the reason for that is that fragrance is considered to be like a trade secret. So, if I'm a popular deodorant brand that has a signature scent and I tell you what's in my scent, then somebody else could copy it. And then I would no longer have that protected market share that I've earned through creating this signature scent.
Mhm.
So you can understand legally why manufacturers aren't required to disclose fragrance ingredients. But what that means is that we have no idea. We have no
Mhm.
idea what's in them. And unfortunately, fragrance is um, often a place where ingredients that are the ickiest hide. So, fragrance often includes phthalates, um, PHTH phthalates, and that is a plasticizer. So, like anything that you have that like smells like plastic, that has phthalates in it. Um, but it's a plasticizer that's an endocrine disruptor, and what that means is that it mimics estrogen in the system. So it's a hormone disruptor, and phthalates are a huge concern right now for showing up in like fish and water systems because they're everywhere, not just in cosmetics, but they're everywhere. And endocrine disruptors are not a joke. Our whole systems function on these small hormone changes in our bodies.
Mhm.
So because fragrance often hides phthalates, and I just don't know, you're not going to tell me. I'm just like, I'll live a mostly fragrance free life. Or
So let me hit on a few things. Um, so you say fragrance. So that's kind of like the least transparent of the ingredients because you don't know what it is. So similar, I'll make a connection, for example, with the vestibular community of spices in food. So those of you who
oh,
are wanting to avoid MSG, when you see spices or natural flavoring, you're like, oh my gosh, it's probably MSG, right? So that's kind of a connection to the beauty world from those of us who look at
yeah,
food labels very closely.
exactly. And it's not necessarily that it's bad. It could just be onions and paprika, but it could also be something that you don't want and you just
Mhm.
don't know.
Right.
So for me, and there have been looks into popular products, popular scents, that have found that there are phthalates present. So it's not just like out of left field. I'm hoping that there are more phthalate free formulations now that people are aware of it. Um,
Mhm.
but so fragrance is a really easy one. You like turn
Mhm.
the bottle over and you scroll down and you look on the ingredients list and it says fragrance and you're like, okay, well you can always choose the fragrance free option,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's just a
And
good
to
way to
make to
think
make
that.
one other connection with the just how important hormones are, a lot of vestibular patients do report changes in symptoms around your depending on where you are in your cycle. So maybe around your period,
Mhm.
around ovulation. Um, And just like Lauren mentioned, your hormones are involved in everything in the body. It has to do with
Yeah.
brain health, it impacts your vestibular system. So it really is very important. It's not just, oh, am I going to get my period this month? Is it going to be heavy or am I going to have PMS? It's all very interrelated. So I just want to kind of put a highlight on that.
And to that point, choosing a fragrance-free laundry detergent or fragrance-free lotion or whatever probably isn't going to instantly change your hormonal makeup.
Hmm.
Like, but it is something that we can control. And again, it's like you can choose not to drink water out of a hot plastic water bottle and reduce your phthalate exposure that way too. So
Hmm.
there are all sorts of these different things that we can do, but again, it's just sort of about being aware of where your exposures are, and if you're able to choose to limit exposures in certain ways, why not? Why not do it?
Hmm.
And as Marie Kondo would say, if it sparks joy, if you love it and you don't want to give it up, you know, then don't. But like
Yeah.
you're in charge of your own destiny, and
Hmm.
in this field anyway, and you can choose to reduce the exposures in the ways that you want to.
Okay. So fragrance is a big one.
Mhm.
Why are there any other big ones that are easy for people to try to pick out on labels and to avoid?
I mean,
I
in
know
terms
the list is long.
of long, it's complicated. I would actually almost go from an opposite tactic and
Okay.
say, don't ever go to the grocery store or to the drugstore and just look at labels. You're just going to be frustrated.
Yeah, that's definitely happened to me.
I promise. It's just going to be terrible. So, what I would recommend doing is if you're looking for a specific product, look for a retailer that is like a specific, and this is more like with makeup, personal care stuff than with hand soap or laundry detergent, although those shops do exist too. I just think that cleaning is kind of its own area of conversation. Um, but so there are places like Credo Beauty or the Detox Market or Pharmaca, these stores that curate clean beauty. And again, their products fall in a continuum of the green. And there's some things where I'm like, huh, okay. But they have standards for their shops. So you can go to their pages and they say, the products that we stock here will never have these ingredients. Cool. So they've weeded out certain things for you. So that's a good way, I think, to start. So you can go to Credo Beauty and you can look at foundation and you can look at all the foundations in there. And if you want to be really stringent about checking your ingredients, then you can look through that specific ingredients list, Google the things that you don't know what they are. Um, EWG is a resource. It's a consumer protection group, and it's gotten some mixed feedback over fear mongering or the way that it rates things, but it's still a good tool because it'll rate entire products um, based on what the ingredients are within. But I still find that it's a good resource just for Googling individual ingredients. So you can say, like, hey, what's up with propylene glycol? And it's like, well, the function of propylene glycol is this. The risks are this: high, moderate, not really a concern in uh, non-reproductive organ toxicity or environmental accumulation or whatever. So you can just Google the individual ingredients in the product that you're interested in. Those shops are actually moving toward having fewer opportunities for samples through the mail. So I need to look into like who's doing it still. But look online for
So
what.
what are the general, you mentioned endocrine disruptors or developmental. What are the major areas of concern?
I mean, I'm sure I'll miss some,
Oh,
but
that's okay. I was just thinking like the top 3.
so you have endocrine disruptors, carcinogens, um, immune system, or like allergy stuff. So like that's a good thing to point out that like some things on EWG will have a less good rating because it can be an irritant. So like an irritant to eyes or skin or whatever. And it's like, maybe you're looking and you're like, I've never had eczema or a rash or whatever. I'm not really concerned about things that could be mildly irritating. It's not a big
Mhm.
deal for me. And so you're like, okay, I'm going to discount that this is a yellow 3 for being irritating because that's not really a concern for me.
Mhm.
But you could go to another one and it could say like, well, this has some like cancer causing carcinogen concerns. And you're like, I'll skip that one. Thank you.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
So let's just back up for a second. So when you said EWG, she's referring to the Environmental Working
well,
Group, and I
yep,
think the website is ewg.org.
that sounds right. You can
And so if
Google,
you look up products, they'll be on a rating scale. So from green to yellow to red, basically kind of like a traffic light. So green is like cleaner or safer, yellow is maybe in the middle, and red is maybe
and
look
again,
closer or, choose what's
Red's
most
like,
important.
don't do it. But
Yeah.
I honestly do find that instead of going to the Environmental Working Group Skin Deep database, it's the full term. Sorry again with the mind reading.
Okay.
Um, Instead of doing that and looking for products, I would look at the products that you're interested in some sort of curated shop, and then look at those individual ingredients that you're unfamiliar with. That's just like a personal opinion. Um, just so people know, in terms of reading a list, the way that ingredients are supposed to be listed is from highest concentration to lowest concentration. So if something's at the very bottom of the list, that means there's probably not very much of it in there. But so like sometimes you'll see like, a shampoo or something that has fragrance as the third ingredient or something, and you're like, what? Like, oh, that's really, there's a lot of that in there. That looks stinky. Um, and also just details. Once they get to like below 2% of the formulation, it can be any order. They don't care. They're not like asking you to split hairs in terms of what you're listing your ingredients as. Um, but that's what EWG has gotten flack for in the past, is like giving a product a higher, less good yellow red rating for something in its formulation without taking into account like the
Concentration of
percentage,
it.
the concentration of it.
Mhm.
But then they've changed it recently, and it's just, I think it's easiest to just look at the individual ingredients personally, and you'll kind of get
Mhm.
used to it. But I think that it's easiest to narrow down the products that you're interested in and then go figure out a way to try them out than to go to the store. Because otherwise you're like there and you're like trying to Google in the store, and you end up either leaving with nothing or with something that you may not feel great about. And it's just icky. So
Mhm.
I would just do your research first and then go try to find it in person to test it out or whatever.
Okay. Is there any specific research you know of linking these toxins to vestibular symptoms like dizziness?
That's a great question. No.
Okay.
I think it's more of like that sort of anecdotal conversation about
Mhm.
um, immune response concerns with some of the chemicals of concern, or organ system toxicity, reproductive or otherwise. There are all these different ways that these chemicals can disrupt our regular processes, and some people are more sensitive to things than others.
Mhm.
And I I also like to think of assessing your personal care routine similar to food, as you already mentioned, in terms of like going on an elimination diet. So I talk to people all the time who maybe have um, a weird rash or weird acne or something, and it's like, pump the brakes, do less. The industry is always trying to sell you something. That's how consumerism works. But our skin likes less generally. So it could be something where you try to just pare back what you're doing and see how you feel, see if it makes any sort of difference. But like maybe you find that fragrance gives you a headache and
Mhm.
exacerbates your vestibular problems.
Mhm. It's pretty well, I mean, if we're talking specifically from the migraine community, the
Mhm.
migraine brain is very sensitive. So it's people with, light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, smells might give them a migraine because it's just sensory overload and your brain kind of
Right.
doesn't know how to handle it. So I think it's really good what you said, kind of pare back, say I'm going to eliminate these few things and see how I feel, because again, just like food, just like an elimination diet in that way, everything impacts everyone differently. And so something that might be listed as a neurotoxin, impacting your brain, might make you feel dizzy, or something that impacts the immune system might make you feel dizzy. There's these different systems that are at play. Autoimmunity can be involved in the um, vestibular system. So it's kind of individual.
And even things like allergy responses. If you have any sort of allergies, it can cause all sorts of weird stuff to happen.
Hmm.
So like I've had it where I've worn a mascara and I'm just like, man, my eyes just ache. Like it just doesn't work. Or
Hmm.
maybe you're wearing something that you're used a hairspray or something that respiratory wise you're sensitive to, and that agitates your ear, nose, and throat system thing and makes you feel bad, but you're not even, I see you laughing at me, but makes you
I
makes you
thought you were making like an ENT reference, like ENT doctor to the ear to, never
oh,
mind.
if it's funnier that way, sure. I'm just saying that, it could be something that is agitating that you
Hmm.
haven't even thought about. So it's worth checking out.
Hmm. It is. I mean, I'm not going to go into like the science and everything behind it, but to Lauren's point on allergens, histamine, which is kind of the body's allergen response, is implicated in the vestibular system. So I know there's people that are sensitive to histamine foods. This would be playing into that same system. So you just want to take a look at the products that you're using, because you want to lessen that burden. And if it can make you feel better and it can improve your overall health, improve the amount of bioaccumulation like Lauren was talking about, it's worth taking a few minutes to choose
And some ways,
products more carefully.
you can do that too are like not choosing aerosols. Don't
Hmm.
use the spray sunscreen for lots of reasons, but like you don't need to be breathing that in, or even thinking about like if you use a loose powder, breathing in loose powder stuff. Basically anything that hits your mucous membranes, so like into your mouth or your nose or your eyes, that is more sensitive. Your skin is a little bit, it's tougher. It's keeping a lot of things out. Once it gets to the mucous membrane, it's not the same, it doesn't have the same defense mechanism. So those are kind of things that you can also be careful about, is thinking about what you'd call exposure routes. So like for example, mineral makeup, if it's put on the skin in like an oil formulation, there's no real evidence to show that it absorbs through the skin, nanoparticles or otherwise. There's just no real evidence to show that it gets into the body through the skin when applied topically. However, one does not want to breathe in loose mineral particles over time because it can cause respiratory problems. So like it's the same thing, it's the same ingredient, but when used differently has either pretty much zero health implications or unfun health implications. So
Hmm.
thinking about those sort of exposure routes is another way to just reduce things, so like not spraying things in your face basically.
That's a good general rule. Um,
It is, but there's a lot of products where you do that.
right, right. I guess that's true. So I think just if we zoom out for a second and think about this conversation, I know it can be overwhelming. I have to say, when I was first talking to Lauren about this topic, I was like, and she was telling me a little bit about the different ingredients and implications to our health. I was like, well, I better go live under a rock because this is insane. So I'm wondering if we can maybe come up with a summary of some few things, some little steps that people can make today to start moving in the right direction. And I just want to say again, this is not to be fear mongering, it's just to empower you that you can make these choices. We can make these choices for our health. Personal care products are a health decision. Many people don't think of it that way. So I'm wondering if you can give us some big takeaway points of things that we can do
Okay.
today.
Yeah. I think the first thing is just use less. Think about all of the products in your life. Do you need them all? When they run out, do you need to replace every single one of them? Thinking about it that way, just reduce in terms of headache or things you have to think about. Um, and then I'll list some ingredients that you can look for. Again, trying to find um, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, words, a curated shop that does some of the work for you can be really helpful. But then also when you're scanning ingredients lists, there are some easy things that you can use to sort of weed out things that you may not want. So saying no to fragrance or parfum, saying no to parabens. Um, Petrochemicals are not necessarily um, bad for you, I suppose, depending on what they are. But if you want to avoid things that come from petroleum, you can look out for things like mineral oil or paraffin wax or propylene glycol. A big no-no, and this is even overwhelming listing all these things out, but really just having a little list is helpful. Um, Saying no to retinol palmate or palmitate, excuse me, retinol palmitate is an important one. That's one that might appear in sunscreen and actually makes your skin more sensitive to the sun. Why they put it in sunscreen formulations is beyond me. It might appear next to vitamin A because that's like, what it is. Um, and then triclosan, which the FDA did ban in certain things, but um, triclosan is a no, is not great. PEGs, DMDM. I actually don't know how to say this works. I only read it. DMDM, hydantoin. I've never actually said it out loud, but that might appear in shampoos or in hair stuff, and is a formaldehyde releaser. So I'm like always reluctant to sort of list ingredients like that because it just feels like this. It's like, oh, okay, well, I have to, make sure I don't have these certain things or whatever. Um, and I do just worry that this whole conversation is overwhelming,
Hmm.
um, which is why I really do think that it's like use less, figure out what you need, like figure out what the essentials are, think about the things that you use most frequently, like to your point about waterproof mascara. Maybe don't make yourself crazy about waterproof mascara that you wear 3 times a year, but the mascara you wear every day, maybe think more about that one.
Hmm.
So think about the things that you use most frequently, choose your essentials, look to curated shops to help you narrow down the options, look at the ingredients. A lot of them are going to be things like sunflower seed oil and uh, elderberry extract and things where you're like, that seems fine. And yeah, it's probably fine. Um, but then there are going to be some ingredients in there where you say, I just don't know what this is. And then you'll look it up and then you'll know what it is. So when you look at it and you see it in the next product, because a lot of these products have a lot of the same ingredients,
Hmm.
especially in like the clean movement, it'll get easier, but only having to research a few products and just be like, hey, I did it. I did my mainstays, the things that I use all day, every day. I have like cleaned those up and I'm just going to not worry about the other stuff so much.
Hmm.
I think is a really solid first approach. And hey, if you want to be like super chill about it, just do it as you run out of things. Like,
Hmm.
oh, I think I need a new chapstick or lip balm. I need a new lip balm. Maybe I will choose one that's not at the end of the cash register.
Hmm. I think that's a really good point because then it's kind of pacing for you as you run out. So then you're only really looking for one thing at a time instead of going to the store and being like, I need to replace everything. And that can get expensive too.
And you'll learn as you go. And again, I feel like I keep saying this, but I do worry that it's just so overwhelming. It's like it is a lot of information. It feels a lot like fear mongering, but it's difficult to say this is something that we should be thoughtful about without providing the information about why we
Mhm.
should think twice about it. But also, again, there's only so much that we can do. And a lot of these things, to your point at the top of our conversation, exist in our environment, you
Mhm.
know, and there's only so many ways that we can avoid certain things. So just trying to remember to not panic. Um, and it's like just take it like one step at a time, but to kind of think about it as like your whole sort of like sustainability, minimalism. And if you use less and you have to worry about less, then that's nice.
Mhm.
Oh,
Good.
I should mention too that Sephora, just in terms of accessibility to in person, because I know people like to try makeup on. Uh,
Mhm.
Sephora does have like I don't know what they're calling it now, a green section where they
Oh,
carry
interesting.
products. So again, there is a spectrum, um, but that's a good opportunity to look for products you're interested in, see if Sephora carries it, and then like maybe you could go try it out at Sephora. Um, I like to buy straight from the brand oftentimes. You can even ask a brand what they prefer because supporting their whole, like if you're buying from a small brand, sometimes supporting their wholesale contracts can be helpful for them. But I do like to go to the small brand directly if I'm going to do it.
Cool. All right. So that was super helpful and informative. And I'm wondering if, and, we're
Or
just
maybe
trying to
too
empower
much.
people. It's just a conversation. Um, I'm wondering if people wanted to learn more from you, where would they find you? What kinds of upcoming things do you have going on?
The best place to find me is at nakedtruthbeauty.com. Uh, it's used to be a sustainable makeup company, but now it's a blog. And so I have deep dives, tips into specific products or explaining certain concepts, this and that. So if there's certain things about this conversation that you'd like to learn more about, chances are there's a blog post about it. And if there's something you are dying to know, you can always email me, Lauren at nakedtruthbeauty.com. And I also exist in social media at Naked Truth Beauty on Instagram and / Naked Truth Beauty on Facebook, I believe. Um, but just in the spirit of transparency, I'm a little bit behind on social media. haven't been super active lately. But there's some backlog stuff there. But I am planning to launch some goodies in the coming months to help folks navigate these tricky waters. So if you want to subscribe to my newsletter at nakedtruthbeauty.com, you can be the first to know about those helpful tools that will be coming your way shortly.
Wonderful. Thanks, Lauren. So, if you found this conversation helpful, you can subscribe, comment, let us know if you have any other questions. You can find me on social media as well, Instagram and Facebook, Rooted Behavioral Education, rootedbehavioraleducation.com. If you want to learn more about behavioral health as it relates to vestibular disorders, I put up content all the time, and I also have a 10 module course. You can visit my website to check that out. So until next time, again, this is the first of my expert interview series, and I'm hoping to bring you new content pretty regularly. So we'll hope to see you then. All right, take
Thanks so
care.
much for having me, Emily.
Yep, sure.